Well, good evening, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. My clock shows 6 o'clock, and it looks like we do have enough folks on the call to go ahead and get started. So we'll start with the first item. Well, I guess first, welcome everybody to tonight's Planning and Zoning Commission. This body's responsibility is to make recommendations and suggestions to staff on code amendments or other planning related items. So with that, Daniel, will you give us the roll call, please?
Thank you, Chair Willett. Appreciate it. Yes. So first off, Chair Willett.
Present.
Vice Chair Martin.
Here.
Commissioner Zagier.
Here.
Commissioner Cassidy.
Here.
Commissioner Pafford.
Here.
Commissioner Young.
Here.
Commissioner Ortiz-Pino. Absent. Commissioner Schwartz.
Here.
Commissioner Wawrocki.
Here.
Commissioner Lane. Absent. Commissioner McCancy. Absent. We have a quorum.
Great. Thank you, Dan, for doing that. So moving on to item number 2, approval of minutes and legal action report. What's the pleasure of the commission?
I move to accept.
Perfect. Do I have a second?
A second.
Awesome. So we got a motion and in its second. Any discussion related to that? Saying nothing, I guess all in favor of approving the minutes and legal action report from June 15, 2022, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes and those minutes approved. So moving on to item number 3, which is a presentation on the housing affordability strategy for Tucson. And I believe we have some guests from the Housing Community Development Department here. So Dan, perhaps you have a presentation, or Sarah, and I'm not sure who is here, but the floor is yours. So however we want to go about it.
Excellent. Real quick, Chair Willett, I just wanted to note that at 6:02, Commissioner McCancy has joined the meeting.
Great. Thank you, Dan.
All right. Well, good evening, commissioners. My name is Sarah Megason, and I'm with the Housing and Community Development Department. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully, as we all know, that can be fun. Let me know if you can see it.
It's coming through. We got it here.
Cool. All right. Well, once again, good evening. It's an honor to be here and present our housing affordability strategy for Tucson. The HAST plan stands for the Housing Affordability Strategy, and it was adopted in December of 2021. The HAST plan was initiated with a charge from Mayor and Council to create a comprehensive, affordable housing strategy in 90 days. I was not in the department at the time that this task was initialized, but Ann Chineka is with us today. She's our Deputy Director at Housing and Community Development. And so she kicked off that back in August of 2021. The data, priorities, and policy initiatives within the HAST plan were primarily based on input and engagement over the past 2 years or prior 2 years through efforts like the housing market study and the PCHIP plan, which stands for People, Communities, Housing, and Investment Plan. In October of 2021, HCD held 2 virtual and 1 in-person meeting to present the draft HAST plan to gather feedback from the public. They also held a developer stakeholder meeting to provide input on barriers to affordable housing development, including zoning barriers and development review process barriers. Throughout October and November, before the plan was adopted, the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development and all 3 of its subcommittees also discussed the draft plan. Feedback from the Commission included a motion to support the draft plan, Just a little background on the CEHD. So Tucson Mayor and Council established the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development in July of 2020. The full commission meets the first Thursday of the month from 4 to 6. And there are also 3 subcommittees that the commission established to advance the goals of the commission. There's the Affordable Housing Subcommittee, the Housing First Subcommittee, and the Housing Segregation Subcommittee. Discussions are currently underway around zoning and the barriers to affordable housing development, including parking, setbacks, densities, and more. And we always encourage the public and members of the community and other various stakeholders to attend the public meetings to provide feedback and specialized input on the topic of housing development. So the plan is broken out into 5 different sections. We won't go into every section in great detail today, but we encourage you to read through the plan in its entirety on your own. It's wonderful bedside reading, and also other times. So we'll kind of dive into the first part of the plan, which is the introduction. And the introduction to housing affordability outlines the problems that we've seen over the last few years when it comes to the rising housing costs. And it also defines the key terms and concepts of housing affordability. So the term affordable housing is when a household can pay for housing while still having money left over for other necessities like food, transport, and healthcare. When a household begins to pay more than 30% of its income on housing related expenses, we call that housing cost burden. Other key terms like market rate, affordable housing, displacement, mixed use, gentrification are all outlined in Appendix A in the glossary of the plan. The housing continuum is a linear model most often used to depict housing options. It illustrates the range of social, non-market, and market housing options available in a community, from temporary to permanent housing, including rental and ownership. All parts of this continuum are important as it relates to the supply of housing. The HAST plan purpose focuses on the supportive housing through the market home ownership, while there are parallel efforts and other initiatives regarding homelessness, including the Housing First approach and purchasing hotels and rehabilitating existing shelters. But the HAST plan primarily focuses on that other tier of housing affordability. The HAST also includes a broad summary of data collected through the housing market study and the PCHIP and the poverty and urban stress report. So this section highlights the challenges Tucson faces when it comes to the housing affordability and how things have changed over the past several years. And here we're just going to highlight a few of the key points inside of the plan. So as you can see, the staggering cost of housing increasing between 2017 and today, and today was 2021, median rent rose 40% and the typical home value in Tucson rose 60%. And I think even in the last year, we've seen those numbers go up even more. And they've both far outpaced the median household income, which is causing most of the Tucsonans to struggle to pay for housing inside of our city. Another graph to kind of show the impact on real Tucsonans. We show in this chart what affordable housing looks like for a few of the common occupations. I always find this very interesting, especially to realize what some of our, healthcare workers might be making, or a family of 4 with a business person as a primary earner is making, and also showing what they can afford for rent and versus what the reality of rent is. So that healthcare support worker only making $27,000 a year, which accounts to 60% of the area median income, should really only be paying $675 a month in rent. However, we know that rent cost doesn't occur here in Tucson, and we're currently looking at least $940, if not more, for a 1-bedroom in Tucson. So I think most Tucsonans are cost burdened across the entire income spectrum. So once we know the data, we start to dive into our policy initiatives and actions inside the plan. Just to reiterate, because the plan was created in only 90 days or less in a sense. A lot of the juice from the plan came from the P-CHIP efforts. So the housing department has multiple different planning efforts that they've been working on over the last few years. So the P-CHIP home priorities discuss increasing affordable rental housing, expanding affordable home ownership, ensuring stable, healthy, and safe housing, and increasing equitable housing. So the HASC policy really builds off of that with a focus on supporting the preservation and construction of housing units. It's also focused especially on the most vulnerable to housing instability, and the actions are presented as short-term, medium-term, and ongoing timelines. There are 10 policy initiatives laid out in the HASC plan. The transform public housing, the number one, as the public housing agency, we own and operate over 1,500 units of public housing. And this first policy is really aimed at getting our own house in order, as some of the affordability periods are coming to an end and a lot of the properties are in need of rehabilitation. Number three is the focus on opportunity areas and opportunity mapping for the acquisition and development of affordable housing. We're also looking to preserve and enhance existing housing and other naturally occurring affordable housing in policy number 4. We're looking on policy number 7 to develop housing on our city-owned sites, and also enhancing efforts for the most vulnerable to housing instability, which includes people who are experiencing homelessness, older adults, persons with disabilities, veterans, youth, and victims of domestic violence. So we're constantly also working to pursue sustainable funding streams, looking at a housing trust fund, bond, taxes, etc. But for the purpose of today, we're going to focus on the 5 of the policies that we believe are related to the Planning Commission. So underlined here are the ones we're just going to kind of focus on today. We're always willing to talk about all of the other policies whenever you feel like you want to give us a call. But today we'll just kind of touch on these because I think they mostly are directly related to the Planning Commission. So number 2 is to build capacity in Tucson around affordable housing development. The main goal of this is that we're becoming our own developers at the city of Tucson while working with different developers to build affordable housing. So that's the main driving force of policy number 2. The mayor and council tasked HCD with creating a development entity, which we have done through the El Pueblo Housing Development Nonprofit, a soon-to-be 501c3 with a board of directors made up of management at the city, including our housing director and deputy director, as well as the assistant city manager. We also have created the housing development manager position, which is my position, which was intended to assist the implementation of the entire HASC plan, as well as really help facilitate and grow the development arm here at the city of Tucson. A big part of my role is working with co-developers on our own projects, as well as assisting other affordable housing development partners as they work to bring affordable housing online in the city. Through this lens, I'm able to see where the development hiccups and pinch points occur and how we can work to smooth them out and keep the projects on time. A lot of affordable housing projects are tied to specific funding sources, which are held to extremely rigid timelines that, if not met, could make the project a complete bust. So while assisting with projects like the Gateway, Cascade, both Newport at the Rodeo and at Amphi and Quadro and the Pima County Community Land Trust, I'm able to really witness the housing development process and sort of understand where there are problems and how we can help to sort of facilitate these things through. Policy number 5 is to update zoning regulations to encourage affordable housing. We believe this is directly tied to you all since you review and make recommendations on code amendments. We know that some housing related code amendments will probably be coming through the pipeline due to the work of the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development and the Affordable Housing Subcommittee. We know that incorporating incentives into planning and overlay zoning on transit corridors, one of the sub policies, We know that the Sunshine Mile did include some affordable housing incentives. And we see in an analysis that there are limitations to what it can produce. So really wanting to continually evolve that and make sure that all incentive designs are actually working and bringing in new affordable housing. We also know that the Planning Commission made the motion for by right parking to be minimized for affordable housing projects. I believe that kind of got lost in the continuation of meetings at the mayor and council, but we hope to work with PDSD to move it along, and also other changes that the commission may come up with and bring forward, such as setbacks, lot coverage, and additional height and density options. So policy number 6 is to facilitate development by reducing costs through innovation. You can see there's 4 sub-policies that are listed in the plan. One of the things that we would really like to do, and that we've been hearing from a lot of our stakeholder developers, is to initiate a formal policy to expedite permitting for affordable housing. It's sort of been coined an HOV lane, and trying to make sure that at least the affordable housing projects that are especially tied to funding deadlines can make sure that they funnel through that development review process without any major hiccups. We expanded the eligibility for our impact fee subsidy. So in March, mayor and council broadened that, and I think that there was even appetite for that to be broadened a little bit further. And then we also have the ADU program. So with our external partners, Mi Casita, creating some funding opportunities for the development of accessory dwelling units, and also inside of the housing department, creating some other funding opportunities for rehabilitation of existing accessory dwelling units as well. So some really awesome things that we're working on to reduce some costs and bring in some more affordable housing. And then policy number 10, I think I always touch on this and I come back to it because expanding education, outreach, and research efforts, I think, is one of the most important parts of the HASS plan and what we do at Housing and Community Development. So in this tight housing market, we find it critical to effectively and efficiently utilize all of the resources that are out there, and also to create new initiatives to connect residents and landlords to resources, as well as information about all of the programs that we have. So I've included a couple of our websites, the housing affordability website, as well as the Housing and Community Development website. Coming soon, as a part of the HASS plan, we are going to launch an action plan task tracker. So this is a place where you can go to keep up to date on all the things we've done to implement the policies of the HASS plan. It's a work in progress. I feel like the more I try to work on it, the more I get bogged down with other tasks. But ultimately, we want it to be a place that you can go and see the progress, because we do want this document to not just sit on a shelf like a lot of the planning documents end up doing. We really are focused on making sure that there's actionable items and that they get accomplished. So hoping to get a lot of these little check boxes marked off inside of our implementation tracker, which will be included on the the HASS plan website here very soon. And then just to kind of wrap up and showcase one of our projects. So as the development arm, we successfully applied for and received low-income housing tax credits for the Milagro on Oracle. This is where we have purchased the no-tell motel, and we are doing an adaptive reuse project to turn the no-tell and the Northern Historic Motor Court into senior affordable housing. We are in a very tight timeline to turn this around. We applied for the low-income housing tax credits in 2 weeks, and somehow by a Milagro, we're awarded them. And now we have 1 year to submit our development package, submit our building permits, and close by June of next year and begin construction soon thereafter. with, a placement and service deadline that will have to also, come into like 14 or 16 months after that. So a very, very tight turnaround. All of those timelines are associated with the low-income housing tax credit. So while we work through this project, we're learning about the development process and where those kind of issues might come up and where we're having difficulties. We will be working through the Grant Road Investment District, the grid. I think it is the first project that will hopefully utilize the grid overlay. And through that process, we're hoping to gain relief from landscaping buffer setbacks, parking relief, and some height so that we can go up a couple more feet than what's currently allowed in the zoning district. It's a super exciting opportunity to work through the project and learn on the fly as we go in regards to the different development standards and where the frustration lies. As a previous reformed planner turned housing developer, all of a sudden, I definitely know where, as a reviewer of these projects and now as someone trying to put it together, seeing that from the perspective and really trying to help facilitate these projects, because ultimately we need more housing. And I think that's the ultimate goal of all of this. So that's kind of the end of my quick and short and sweet presentation. Ann and I are both here if there's any questions, and we really, really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak about the HASP plan.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah and Ann, for coming out. It's really exciting, the work you guys are doing. So I commend you both for the hard work you're putting in on the work that you're doing here in the community. It's great. Are there any do any of the commissioners have any questions for Sarah or Ann regarding the HASP strategy plan or anything? Jason, do you have something? You unmuted yourself. There you go. The floor is yours.
I did. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
So I'm completely new to this. This is my first commissioner meeting, but I would like to know, first of all, what are the goals of this commission, the development commission's role in all this? I mean, what are our goals for helping you or whatever implement this plan or whatever? That's probably not for Sarah to answer, but somebody from the commission.
So Commissioner McCansky, and we're going to talk a little bit about the roles of the Planning Commission in I think two items or so. But as Sarah had kind of pointed out, the kind of what the Planning Commission does is one of their tasks is to review and recommend amendments to the zoning code. And there are several recommendations within the HASP plan related to zoning code changes that would allow for changes to our residential code that would support affordable housing and support the plan. So that is a lot of the reason why we are bringing the HASP plan to you, to give you kind of an understanding of what that planning policy is that would drive those potential code changes. There have in the future and that type of thing. And that's the reason why we're doing that. The next item related to the infill incentive district also helps, and we'll go over that, implement some of those goals as well. And we're just kind of trying to connect some of those dots for you, to kind of show the kind of larger picture of what we're trying to do.
Perfect. Thank you, Daniel, for answering that one. Commissioner Zigier, your hand is raised.
I want to thank you. I tried to read, I didn't get through all of it, but it's well compiled, and I do appreciate the way the data was presented and the different ways it were presented in as far as looking at income and affordability and how we rank with the rest of the United States. Okay, first is I was at the meeting on, was it Monday, on Arizona State House Bill 2674. And maybe are we working with this, against this? How is this going to affect any decisions or policy that we advise as we move forward? That's question one. And the second question is really light, is didn't realize that got the no-tell motel, and I'm sorry, that's kind of an iconic sign, and I hope that signage will be saved and moved over to Drockman with the other iconic signs that we have from throughout Tucson. Okay, and thank you. If HB 2674 is my major question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And, I might take a quick stab and then defer to Anne, see how well I do. But that's definitely something I've been following, and we all were there, and the housing director presented as well as Corin. I think that, and one thing that I keep harping on, and I'll say in every forum I have the opportunity to, there's, I think, 3 S's that are the pillars to housing affordability. Supply is one of them. And so I think that, you know, the fact that people are addressing supply is important, but also stability and subsidy are the other 2 pillars, I believe, that are really important for addressing affordability. So I think supply is one kind of component. And I think that in a lot of ways, the work that we're doing can help inform the state legislature on, you know, certain things that we believe might need to happen in order to help increase housing supply. But I do know that we keep advocating for affordability to also be a component of that, and that, you know, just supply in general won't fix the crisis that we have when it comes to affordability at the city. And then the no-tell motel sign will definitely not be thrown away. And there might be some fights between assistant city managers and other people, depending on where it goes. I know my personal preference, and what I will fight for is to keep it on site in some capacity as a landmark to the location, either through an art installation or just kind of maintaining it in the right of way. So don't worry about the sign. It's not gonna, you know, be lost and destroyed. So we'll definitely keep up with that. And I'll defer to Anne for other thoughts on SB, the SB bill.
And on that, I'll just thank you, Sarah, and thank you, commissioners. The one thing I would add on that is Housing and Community Development is a member of the Arizona Housing Coalition. We also participate with League of Arizona Cities and Towns. Both of those entities had submitted letters saying, hey, we care about housing, but this bill is not how we need to go in terms of achieving what we want to do. And so the League of Arizona Cities and Towns is convening kind of a regular meeting, debriefing on how it's going. Liz or I try to participate in those meetings regularly to offer advice. At the same time, I mean, personally, given it's a state process, I do think it's harder to be able to influence it. But we are participating, giving our thoughts on how anything that is developed may impact cities.
Great. Thank you, Anne and Sarah, both again for coming out this evening. We really appreciate the information. So are there any other questions for these ladies before we let them go? Not singing again, but again, thank you both for being here. We really appreciate your time and the information you've presented. So moving on to item number 4, that's a presentation on the infill incentive district. And I believe staff probably has a presentation for us. So I'll turn it over to Dan or Corin. I don't know who's doing it, but the floor is yours.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair Willett. Let me just share my screen real quickly here. Okay, excellent. All right. Well, yeah, so as I had mentioned previously, related to the infill incentive district, so we wanted to kind of start this off with a conversation about housing, but we are also at the same time working on revisions to a tool that we currently have that really does help with development in and around the downtown area. And can potentially have elements that help to support that housing, the HAST plan that you just heard about. Additionally, we did just want to let you know that this is something that we started back in February. We are currently working through the kind of public process and doing focus groups related to it, but it will be in front of you shortly, within the next month and a half. And we wanted to give you a little preview of this ahead of time, to kind of give you just an understanding of how it works, and what you may see in the future. So what is the infill incentive district? So this is an optional zoning overlay that pretty much goes over, as you can see on the map here, the downtown area, as well as some areas to the north and south along major corridors. This is one that's used to encourage pedestrian and transit-oriented mixed-use development. And then through that process, the projects must meet design standards, historic preservation regulations, and they do that in turn for more flexibility. So what ends up happening, it's more of an urban code for that downtown area, but in turn you have to have a higher level of design and you have to meet historic preservation standards. So this is one that was established by Mayor and Council in 2010, and it's been through several iterations since then, as well as the current review that we're looking at. It does have kind of common goals with other efforts and other things, and the Plan Tucson, things like more vibrant, equitable, inclusive neighborhoods, incentivizing investment in underutilized and vacant spaces, and then creating neighborhoods that are pedestrian and transit oriented. So this is kind of the background and a brief history of this plan, or this zoning overlay, essentially. So back in 2010 was kind of the first iteration of this. There was a lot of public review, public comments. There were 100+ meetings related to this to kind of develop it. There were several projects that were developed around that time, including several that really didn't meet the intent or the goals of the community necessarily. So in 2013, Mayor and Council directed staff to go and revise portions of our code to simplify the infill incentive district, incorporate it. So there were several other overlays within downtown, like these were what they call urban overlay districts, but they function very similar to this, such as the Rio Nuevo district and the Downtown Links urban overlay, and incorporate all of those together and create one document. They also wanted to take a look at historic issues. There were a couple projects that demolished contributing historic structures, and they wanted that to be a part of kind of that review. So between 2013 and 2015, there was quite a bit of analysis and deliberation. There were 100+ public meetings. Again, there were stakeholder groups. There was an IID citizen task force with people from those areas. And then there was a subcommittee of the Planning Commission that helped with those revisions. This was really the last time the IID underwent significant changes, was really back in 2015. Ultimately, on February 18th, 2015, it was adopted by Mayor and Council, and they put a sunset date on that ordinance of 4 years, essentially. So if we didn't come back and look at it again, that would basically, all those changes would go away. So that they put a sunset date of January 31st, 2019. Back in 2018, we did a review of the ordinance because of that sunset date. At the time, we went through and we did public meetings and got public review. It was understood that it was functioning fairly well, but that we should probably come back and take another look at it in several years to kind of see how downtown has changed and if there are additional changes that would be made. So what ended up happening was Mayor and Council adopted the IID ordinance with minor updates, and then they extended that sunset date out 4 years, which is why we're back in front of you taking a look at it again. The sunset date for this is January 31st, 2023. Some of the items that they wanted us to take a look at, or at least look into when they adopted it, we were requested to look at parking conditions and trends to make sure that we have adequate parking downtown. They wanted us to conduct research to better understand areas where we're seeing less development. So these are the areas, if you look at the infill incentive district, most of the development has been downtown and 4th Avenue and just south of downtown. Not as much has occurred north. It does go all the way up to Grant Road, especially between Speedway and Grant Road, we have not seen any projects that have utilized the infill incentive district. They wanted us to look at design guidelines and maybe ways to change some design standards related to it. And then they wanted us to do a housing study to determine how to deal with some of the increasing housing costs. For 3-4 years further, we've continued to see those housing costs, and that's something that we're really going to be looking at as we move forward with this. So we wanted to kind of show you just an example of some of the projects that have come through with the infill incentive district, give you an understanding of how it works. Again, these are urban, it's more of an urban code to develop for especially downtown areas where the underlying zoning doesn't particularly work for those spots. So that's where that flexibility comes in. This first one that we have here is the Flynn. This is at 110 South Church. This was completed in 2021. This one has 243 market rate residential units, 424,000 square feet of gross floor area. It did incorporate some historic resources on site, so those remained. And some of the modifications that it did have to go through, and it went through a design review process, are things like parking reductions, reductions of setbacks. So we have, the underlying zoning has significant setbacks that wouldn't allow for this type of development, as well as some landscaping and access issues related to that. Oops. The next one is the Maris. So this is an example of an affordable housing project that has been developed utilizing the infill incentive district. This was completed in 2018. This had 83 affordable senior residential units in downtown. It included an adaptive reuse of a historic Marist College building, which you can kind of see over here off to the right. And then some of the modifications, again, because it needs that flexibility in downtown, because of this, suburban, basically zoning code that we have, they were able to get parking reductions and some setback reductions, as well as some of the landscape waivers to allow for that to happen. This is an example of another project. This is the Hilton Dual Brand Hotel. So we have seen several hotels utilize the infill incentive district. This was completed in 2021. It says 163,000 square feet of gross floor area. And some of the modifications used for this were things related to environmental services, offloading and onloading, just were challenging because of the urban setting. Off-street loading, parking, landscaping, and setbacks for this. You see kind of a combination. A lot of the downtown sites require those type of modifications to allow for the more urban setting, urban development. And then another one is related to adaptive reuse. So what it's very good at doing as well is smaller projects. So about half of the projects that have been utilized with the infill incentive district have been for adaptive reuse. And this is an example of an adaptive reuse project. So this Bacher Cider House, which is at 400 North 4th Avenue, was completed in 2020. This is an adaptive reuse of an existing retail space in a historic building. So it's about 6,000 or so gross floor area. The reason why this wouldn't have been able to go in under the existing zoning code is related really to parking and landscaping. When you do a change of use, so from something like a retail to I think it's a tasting room, so it's maybe a bar, restaurant use, the parking requirements are significantly higher. They go from 1 per 300 square feet to 1 per 50 square feet. So there would be no way that they would be able to provide the existing parking to allow for something like this to happen. So you allow for those modifications, and then you can reuse those historic buildings for other purposes, especially in areas like 4th Avenue, where there's already that kind of urban walkable setting. Also, just related to that, the landscaping was waived on this one because it is an existing building. There really wasn't the room or any place to put that landscaping because it is an existing building with an existing sidewalk and that type of thing. So one other thing that's kind of been interesting with the infill incentive district is kind of looking at how it is as far as just placemaking. So when you start to get the combination of all these projects in one area, it leads to kind of a transformation experience of a place. So, there are a couple different areas like this where you start to see clusters of different change and different projects. One's on 4th Avenue, really around 4th and 6th. You see all of these different projects coming in. Another one is really this area over here near, really it's Church, Stone, and then Broadway, where you see several projects all coming in and really kind of changing that placemaking and that sense of place in those areas. An example of this really is Stone and Broadway. So Stone and Broadway, this is back in 2011 in the corner. And basically what you have here is this plaza here. You have one-story office over here. You have outdated offices over here. You have a lot of surface parking here as well as surface parking here as well. So if you look at this corner as of now, what you end up with something like this. We have the new streetcar stop that came in. So again, this supports transit-oriented development. So the streetcar, as that got developed, that goes in there. You have new affordable housing over here. You have an adaptive reuse of that historic building that was there that was kind of run down a little bit, as well as new housing and then ground floor medical office, and really transforming it into a more pedestrian feel and pedestrian space in a more urban setting instead of having those surface parking lots and the single story areas. So just to kind of give you an understanding of what has been developed utilizing the infill incentive district, we've had 11 mixed use projects. Now, just to clarify, these are items that have been built, and there actually have been more that have been approved, but just wanted to kind of point that out. But we've had about 11 mixed use projects, 7 residential multifamily projects. There have been 22, and this is really that adaptive reuse element. So we've had 22 commercial services, and that's food and beverage, service and entertainment in the downtown. We've had commercial services offices, 5 of those, 3 hotels, and I think there actually are a couple more in the pipeline. We've had 2 kind of cultural civic uses that have used it, and then some retail food and beverage sales that have also used it. So in total, 52 new different uses have come in and utilized it. That has led to 1,120 residential units, with 250 of those, so 16% of total, actually a little more than that, being affordable or senior housing units related to this. There's been over a million square feet of commercial space that has been developed utilizing it. So quite a bit of development has been done through the infill incentive district over the last 10 years or so. Just to kind of give you an understanding of kind of some office and retail trends. So we did a little bit of analysis just to get an understanding of kind of what's going on down there and how we can support kind of the downtown area. So what we've seen is just that it's kind of in flux right now, right? So downtown office, while the vacancy rate hasn't really changed, it's actually quite low, as well as retail vacancy rate, we're not seeing a lot of those projects coming in necessarily. And when we do see commercial projects, are usually restaurants and bars. What we have seen really is that the projects that we are seeing coming in recently, especially, are residential projects. So we're seeing a lot of residential projects, multifamily residential, as well as kind of hotel and lodging and entertainment and things of that sort. We did at the beginning of this project went out. We were we kind of joined in on some events for the Tucson Norte Sur, which is a planning project that runs that's looking at BRT running from the Tucson Mall to downtown to the airport. We joined on them just to get people's kind of feelings about downtown and how they felt about downtown. This was kind of some of that preliminary public input. With most people saying, or a majority of people saying positive and neutral or neutral things about downtown, with some of the kind of themes related to that are just kind of bike and ped transit. I will say that some of these are skewed towards transportation because those were transportation meetings. But these are some of the things that people said is positive. Residential support services downtown. They like some of the culture and the Southwest identity. And then some of the things that they're kind of concerned about, auto-centric transit, gentrification, and then kind of generic modern style buildings, and then it's expensive. So from there, we went through and we held some stakeholder meetings in May, and stakeholder listening session. We had 50 plus people who joined us, had some really good listening sessions. And these were kind of the key areas of discussion that came out of that: affordable housing, just how the code is administered, design standards, mixes of land use. There was quite a bit of conversation about the fact that there are certain things that are missing from downtown, one of which is like a grocery store, like a full service grocery store in downtown. Historic resources and sustainability. So this is kind of how it broke down as far as some of the suggestions per focus area. With the largest group being that it's successful and there really were no suggestions for changes. And then the second largest being really the administration of the code and how do we clean it up so it's not as confusing. And I think that's both for the applicant and potentially the residents and the people notified of those properties, as well as development standards, design, sustainability, and housing. So from that, we went through and we pulled together some focus groups. And we're working right now and we're going through and doing focus groups on some of these topics. So affordable housing, we've been focusing on with the community and housing group that Sarah was just talking about, where we've been kind of engaging them on suggestions and how we can address some of this, as well as going and talking to individual kind of affordable housing developers, but also setting up groups to talk about, changes of design standards, how do we address those land use mixes and administration of the code. One of the things that did come up was the historic, and it does appear that the historic elements, because it doesn't allow for you to demolish a contributing structure or a structure that is eligible to be contributing, it seems to be working well. That was the general sentiment that we received from those meetings. Obviously, I think when they went through and put that prohibition on that back in 2015, it really changed the way it works. So you end up with the infill going into the vacant parking lots or the non-contributing structures and not the contributing structures, especially along a place like 4th Avenue. So I did want to touch, just because we talked about the HAST earlier, on some of the affordable housing projects that have been developed utilizing the infill incentive district. The Westerner, that was the one that I pointed out that was at the corner of Stone and Broadway. There were 50 affordable units with ground floor retail and commercial that were done there. That's at 10 West Broadway. There was that Maris project that I talked about earlier with 83 affordable senior residential units. 7th Avenue Commons. So this one is at 7th Avenue. Wait a minute. Yeah, it's 6th Avenue and Stone. Well, it's just east of Stone. Anyways, so that one has about 50 affordable units. West End Station. So this is one of the ones that actually came in under the old iteration before we made those changes in 2015. But this is one at the Mercado area that's over there, and that was 70 affordable units. In total, we've had really 250 affordable units that have been developed with the infill incentive district. One thing that we have done, so very similarly to the infill incentive district, we have other urban overlay districts, which I mentioned earlier. They're optional overlays. They function very similar. They basically, in exchange for design review, you have to meet design standards and you get more flexibility. So the Sunshine Mile overlay, which was recently adopted by Mayor and Council, made the first attempt really to address affordable housing in an overlay. In this, adopted in 2021, it included regulatory incentives for residential projects that included affordable housing units. We have yet to see anyone utilize this, but the way it worked was that any project that requires 15% affordable housing, which is 80% of AMI, receives the following benefits. They would have an exemption from a density cap, and then they would get reduced parking. So 62% reduction for affordable units. And then there were terms related to how long. It was, I think, 50 years from C of O for multifamily, 30 years for condominiums. And then they have to report annually to Housing and Community Development. One other thing, and this is kind of the basis of what we're looking at for potential affordable housing incentives for the infill incentive district. But one other thing that we are looking at is just, it's been challenging to utilize the infill incentive district or overlays for 100% affordable housing projects because of how the process is. And there needs to be kind of some sort of preliminary approval in order to get some of those credits. So for the low income housing tax credits, it makes it quite challenging. Sarah was talking about the quick timeline that they're dealing with. Part of that's because of the regulations at the federal level, and a lot of times the overlay doesn't really align with that. So we're looking into potential changes to support more 100% affordable housing projects that we can potentially build into this. Coming up to you, this is kind of just a sneak peek of what you'll be seeing, some potential changes to the infill incentive district. One is allowing more housing, figuring out ways to do this. So allowing potential residential to be used in industrial or in areas zoned for industrial uses. So there is about 25% or so of the infill incentive district that is zoned industrial. So looking at potentially using those, there's some areas that do allow for, I think one that allows for residential and industrial, but looking at how that might work. And then that would help, and then help us kind of meet that growing demand for housing. Affordable housing, how do we promote that? Looking at the Sunshine Mile, but also maybe some other changes related to that. And then modifying downtown links design standards. So in downtown, as you likely know, if you've been downtown, we have a new construction project, transportation project that's going on with the downtown links. Once that's completed, a lot of the design standards don't necessarily work with the new roadway that's going through there. Additionally, there are areas to the north, which I talked about earlier, that haven't really seen a lot of change or development that was intended with the infill incentive district. So looking at those design standards and what changes we might make to make it more appropriate for those areas. So just to kind of give you an overview of kind of where we're at. So started back in February, kind of forming the stakeholder group, supporting research in April, going through and doing the background information, held that first stakeholder meeting, and then from that, pulling those potential areas of change. And then really we're at this portion right now, which is you doing those focused stakeholder meetings to help shape the draft amendment, and we're drafting those proposed amendments currently. We anticipate public meetings to review the proposal early in October, so in about 3 weeks or so, 3 or 4 weeks. And then we're looking to come back to you with a draft proposal October 26th. And that'll be a study session. So this is kind of an informational session. That'll be a study session, a little more formal as far as the review from the commission. From there, we're looking at November for a public hearing and recommendation that would lead to ultimate adoption from mayor and council ahead of the sunset date in December of 2022. I'm happy to answer any questions related to this. We really just wanted to give you guys an overview, get you thinking about it, and get you kind of set up and prepped and ready for what's coming to you in the near future.
Great. Thank you, Daniel, for that presentation. It looks like we have a couple commissioners with questions. So Commissioner Young, I saw your hand go up first. We'll turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair Willett. Great presentation, Dan. I just have a couple of comments and a couple of questions as well. I really applaud the city for focusing development efforts downtown. I think, in a lot of ways, it's really going great. I mean, where we're going with climate change and, other issues, building denser urban environments, I think is critical. And, the city's come a long way, really, even in just 10 years. One of my main concerns, I'm also on the Commission for Equitable Housing and Development, and one of my main concerns is what is being done to address gentrification, and even maybe more so than gentrification is the displacement that comes from it. I feel like there's been some lip service to it, but I don't know that it's really being measured, and I don't think that we have a really good grasp on it. So, as cities and towns put a lot of energy and effort into this kind of work, a lot of development happens, which is great, but I feel like we don't do enough to really help folks that have been there a long time, or low-income folks to continue to stay in an area that really made it a great place in the first place. So I'm just wondering if that is being addressed at all, and if so, how. And then kind of a separate question, they might be related. And I don't know if this is, honestly, the place that this could be answered, but I have noticed that, a lot of downtown housing has been built, a lot of affordable housing, which I think, the city deserves kudos for getting affordable housing built before, downtown really blew up. But why I really want to say all of the large multifamily housing that's been built, why is it all rental and why is almost none of that being sold to homeowners? So I know there was a lot in there, but that's my thoughts and questions.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So Commissioner Young, yeah, it has been a part of the conversation. I think there's certain elements within the infill incentive district that supports kind of limiting displacement and things of that sort. I think obviously one of the things we're trying to do is support more affordable housing in those areas. We're also trying to support mixes of different types of residential units and things of that sort that would lead to mixed incomes and different housing options for people. And I think that kind of also goes to your kind of question before about the really large residential development that's occurred within the infill incentive district. I think part of that's the market and what's being requested at this point, or what the market want or needs. But I also think that a lot of times our codes don't necessarily support a lot of those kind of the missing middle and some of the housing types. I think there's definitely tools within this to try to support and try to help with gentrification. It's hard to even define necessarily what exactly that is. So I think that is a challenge in itself. But I think that there are also other efforts in the city that are going on to try to help with those as well. And I think I hope I answered your question. I apologize. It's not.
Yeah, no, that's great, Dan. I appreciate that. Again, I just really want to encourage the city to do a better job, frankly, of addressing gentrification. I think you kind of nailed it in a way that, as the city of Tucson can even really name gentrification. What is it? How it's affecting people? New housing and having new housing available for people of all incomes is critical, but displacement really has a lot to do with people that have been there a long time and are essentially forced to leave because of development pressures and whatnot. So particularly I would say with the way the housing market pressures have impacted Tucson in a way that hasn't in a long time. It's just more critical than ever in a town like Tucson that we really drill down to that and can name it and measure it and understand it, so that the kind of fabric of the community that I think Tucsonans love so much doesn't disintegrate before our eyes, which I think a lot of people think it is. So anyway, thank you for your presentation and great work. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Young, for your questions. It looks like Commissioner McCancy had his hand up next.
Yeah, thank you. First, just a quick comment. I'm seeing a lot of other cities, including ones that I've lived in, look at blocking traffic completely from some of these very urban, streets as a way to, improve the ambiance of downtown. And I hope we might be looking at some of that too. But my question has to do with the public perception poll. The 4852. I was kind of disheartened to see that was not really a rousing endorsement of the IID work. And so my one question is what was the split between, in that 52% that was positive or neutral, what was the neutral component? Because it's just not if there's that much negative perception, it seems like one of the things we'd want to make sure of in these amendments or revisions that, we try to address that 48% in some way.
Yeah, so no, thank you, Commissioner McKenzie. I appreciate it. Yeah, so I think there's just to kind of clarify a little bit about this. One, it was how people feel about downtown, not necessarily the infill incentive district. We were trying to just get an understanding of how people felt about downtown.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So when you start to see things like this, it's the auto-centric transit. I think there is that concern about the gentrification that Commissioner Young had talked about. One of the things that did come up was the generic modern style buildings, so that that's a little more design oriented, as well as expensive, which is something that we're looking at as far as affordable housing and things of that sort.
Okay. And then the other question, kind of basic. Again, I'm very new to all this. How is affordable defined?
So I have it here. Yeah, so it's basically housing that, so there's kind of two elements of it. It's 30% of your income. So housing that costs less than 30% of your income when your income is 80% of the average median income of the city. So that's how it's essentially defined. It's a little confusing.
Okay, say that second part again. Less than 30% of your income when your income is what, 80% of something?
80% of the average median income of the city.
Of the
area median income. I don't know if we still
Area
have
median.
HCD,
Oh,
but
maybe, yeah.
they could chime in. But yeah, basically housing is considered affordable for any household if they're spending no more than 30% of their income on housing costs. That could be your rent or mortgage plus utilities.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner McKenzie, for your questions. It looks like Commissioner Zajir has her hand up.
Oh, hi. Yeah, so I had a question. It concerns the average median income at 80%. So that AMI rents in the affordable housing groups that were mentioned. And so in these 250 affordable housing groups that are there, I think you said a lot of them were senior occupied. So given the inflation, are these rents adjusted over the year? Rather, say if with inflation, the rents should be actually going down for these folks, given if you're going by 80% AMI. So that's one question. And you had a slide up here that was it had a comment about e-commerce versus brick. You're looking at vacancy rates in as far as businesses and retail shops. And I went by so fast I didn't quite understand. Are you saying that the vacancy office space in downtown Tucson, the vacancy rate has remained stable over the last 2 years, or has it gone down? And retail space has gone up, or retail? I see a lot of closed shops down there. So, and I can't go into office buildings. I don't know what's occupied. And is there a thought to actually transform some of these blank spaces into affordable housing units or dwellings or something like that?
Yeah, so Commissioner Zajir, so just related to those spaces downtown, so that data that we had pulled shows that it's kind of interesting. So the data that we pulled, and this is a little old, it was back in March, but shows that the vacancy hasn't really changed, and it's still well below the 10-year average. But that doesn't mean they're not vacant spaces. I think businesses back in March may have been waiting to see whether they wanted to give up their lease, or maybe they had longer term leases. So I have a feeling we're still in flux. Basically, I'm just kind of showing that we're still kind of in flux as far as seeing how office will be used as we move forward. And the same thing kind of has happened with retail. I will say anecdotal evidence shows that yes, there really is less demand for retail and office as we move forward, as you were saying, when you see the vacant spaces downtown. I think one of the things we would like to see is, yes, the ability to have more residential and utilize some of those spaces for residential. Office buildings, it's challenging to convert office to residential a lot of times, just because of how utilities and water and things are all laid out within those buildings. But that is definitely something that we'd like to see. And adaptive reuse is something that is supported by the infill incentive district. But that's definitely something we'd like to see.
Like a grocery store.
Yeah. Yeah, and a grocery store. We'd love to see a grocery store.
All right. Good, thank you.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Ziegler, for your questions. Dan, I do have a couple questions just regarding boundary. Is there any discussion of expanding that or allowing some mechanisms that if, parcels that are split by the IID and under common ownership or something like that, that are abutting, is there any dialogue going on about potentially allowing for that expansion to occur to help, create more meaningful projects on some parcels that are within the IID? What comes to mind is there are a lot of property along the Stone Corridor that have the IID splitting them, and it makes it really challenging from a development standpoint to make a deal pencil and utilize something that is of such a great benefit to the community. And so just wondering if there's any dialogue going on regarding that.
Yeah, Commissioner Willett, so that's something we have discussed. I know there are several parcels that are kind of split in half, where for some reason the boundary splits them right in half instead of the full parcel. I know Stone and Speedway is one of those. There's another one I think that's over on Speedway in Maine that's like that, to where for whatever reason when drawing the boundary, that's the way it went. We are looking at making some minor adjustments. When you start making larger adjustments, there's some legal ramifications because this is set out in state statute. But we are looking at making some minor adjustments to some of those boundaries.
Awesome, great, thank you, Dan. Are there any other questions for staff regarding the IID? Not seeing any other hands wave or raise, so we'll go ahead and move on. Thank you so much, Dan, for giving us that presentation. It's very informational and I definitely appreciate it. So moving on, that brings us to item number 5, Planning Commission rules refresher. So Dan, back over to you.
Excellent. Well, yeah, no, thank you. And we also have the city clerks here as well as the city attorney. So if you have questions kind of related to some of the, especially open meeting law and kind of how that functions, it's a smaller portion of the presentation, but we can always bring them into the conversation as well. So just wanted to talk a little bit about some things, kind of talk about one, the Tucson Planning Commission, what our goals are, what we do as a body, why we plan, kind of some of our roles and responsibilities. We like to do this as a refresher every once in a while. We've had quite a bit of turnover in the last year or so with new commissioners. And we understand we have commissioners that have been here for a while and have a lot of experience as well. And so as we're going through this, if you see something in here where you have suggestions or there are roles that you think of that you've seen, please feel free to raise your hand or chip in and kind of be part of the conversation. But yeah, we like to just kind of do this refresher every once in a while with the commission. So as many of you likely know, the City of Tucson Planning Commission is really here to advise Mayor and Council, Planning and Development Services. It's listed as Housing and Community Development. They also are listed in our code as an advisory, as advising them as well. It doesn't really happen as much because we split it at a certain point. But on the adoption of long-range plans, policies, specific plans, and then standards that affect land use and development. So those are things like the general plan, the Plan Tucson, area and neighborhood plans that are developed by all the different neighborhoods in the city, as well as the zoning code, which you have been working on several zoning code amendments recently. That right there is the Planning Commission website. At that website, that's where all the materials are. That's where we have links to the clerk's page as well related to this. I'm going to share all of these slides from both the plan stuff, the IID stuff, this with you on the website. So you'll be able to access all of those as well after the meeting. There are 13 members on the commission. They have a 2 4-year term limit, and it's really 2 per ward. So the way it's set up is that one resident from each ward, or each ward gets to appoint one person that's a resident within their ward, as well as someone that's just from the greater city, so they're citywide. And then the mayor is allowed to have one person that they can appoint. The quorum for the commission is 7 members, so that's a majority of the total. And they generally meet on the first and third Mondays. Yet sometimes that gets shifted because of mayor and council dates. So what ends up happening is mayor and council will sometimes move their Tuesday meeting to a Wednesday, and then we get bumped back to a Tuesday and a Thursday schedule, which sometimes happens. I think next month is one of those months where that happens. And then we're subject to open meeting law requirements, and I'm going to go over a little bit of that a little bit later. So why plan? Just kind of some of the reasons why we do planning and why we do do what we do here. It helps to provide direction for the city to adapt and evolve as we move forward. It helps to support goals and policies and priorities of the city and the community. It provides supports sustainable growth and address climate change. So you'll see a lot of policies within Plan Tucson, which is our general plan, that really provide that guidance for sustainable growth to help address climate change and some of those other things that are important to our community. It provides direction for future economic development, and then it helps to connect people with the broader community. So there's a lot of reasons why we try to plan and plan ahead and provide that guidance for who we are as a community and how we change and evolve as a community moving through. So some of the roles and responsibilities that we have, just kind of different bodies that kind of play a part in the Planning Commission. So we have mayor and council, we have planning commission, we have staff, and then we have the public. And we all play certain roles kind of related to this. I know a lot of us have experienced this. So just kind of the role of mayor and council in this, and they appoint you as commissioners, but they set policy related to what we do in a lot of ways. So they set policy for code amendments that come through. They'll tell staff to go out and do research and then bring amendments that try to achieve whatever that policy direction is. They decide legislative actions. So once you make your recommendation, it goes to them. They will actually go through and they'll vote on those and decide those legislative action. They hear appeals to a lot of different cases. They established kind of general procedures, so your procedures of how you operate as a commission. And then they kind of balance that relationship between the commission, staff, public, and they're the ultimate decider related to that, and provide that political perspective. As the commission, and this is of the commission, not necessarily commissioners themselves, you'll see more of a role of the commissioner as an individual next. But some of the roles that the commission has is to really assist in development of those general area neighborhood plans. You help to coordinate planning efforts, make special studies on planning issues of concern, should mayor and council want to direct you to do so. And then you implement adopted city policy, again, through either plans or through code amendments and things of that sort. One thing I do want to point out here is just that unlike other communities and a lot of other communities, is that you don't review rezonings or special exceptions, which are similar to conditional use permits, which they have in other communities. Pima County has a planning and zoning commission. You are just a planning commission. You're not the quasi-judicial body. So that is actually the job of the zoning examiner, who is the one who reviews those rezoning cases and special exception cases. Other things that the commission must do, it really does need to balance the relationships between mayor and council, staff, and the public as well. And it helps to really provide that community perspective. So they appoint you to provide that community perspective on policies that will be coming in front of them through your recommendation and your findings. So so the role of the planning commissioners, or of the planning commissioners, is to ensure the public is engaged in productive testimony, to provide well thought out recommendations, and recognize mayor and council's roles in policy developments. That's a little different from the next one, which is, oh, what did I? Okay, anyways, sorry. Us as staff has a role as well in all of this. So we review applications for completeness. This is more related to plan amendments than it is for code amendments and other things of that sort. We are here to act in a fair, ethical, and consistent manner. We are here to inform the Commission of local agency policy plans and ordinances. So giving you that background information that you need and staff reports. We draft the plans and those changes. So general plans, area plans, neighborhood plans, we help to do that. Sometimes with the help of a consultant, but we do that. We make recommendations to you. And then we're here to answer technical questions and help to facilitate that public review process. We are pretty much the technical policy perspective in this whole kind of thing. The role of the commissioners, you as the commissioners, are here to review staff reports before the meeting and to prepare questions for staff and other participants, to stay focused on the issues in front of you, to provide input to us, and then to consider public comments and feedback and bring that to the commission for discussion and ultimate recommendation. The role of the public. Public is a big part of this as well because we have public hearings and everything goes through public hearing and has public background as well. But they're here to present local background information, to become informed on the project and the process, to focus on the issue in front of the commission, but also to really provide that community perspective to the commission so they can make educated decisions and make recommendations based on that feedback. So that's kind of the roles that each of these different groups play that ultimately lead to the product and the recommendations that go to mayor and council and the ultimate either amendments to a plan, new plan, or code amendments. Just wanted to go over real quickly the planning framework. And this is kind of what I was talking about earlier where, why we brought in, HCD to talk about the HAST, or I think it was, 6 months ago, we brought in Department of Transportation and Mobility to talk a bit about the Move Tucson plan and kind of where that was and how that influences policy. But there is really a planning framework that starts with, the general plan to provide that guidance, whether it's, specific plans, urban design plans, it could be just kind of land use plans. There's zoning. That helps to do this, helps to implement. So that's our Unified Development Code. And then there's that flexibility within the code as well. So special exceptions and variances like the Board of Adjustment does, or even administrative variances such as our design development option. We permit and process permits. And we also have, subdivision requirements, environmental review, among many other things that we do within our kind of planning realm. This is kind of the land use hierarchy, and I was kind of talking a little bit about that, where it goes from really federal regulations to state regulations, and then it goes down kind of through the general plan, working through specific plans with that guidance, and then the Unified Development Code that implements the general plan, all the way down to potential, some of those relief plans, development packages, and it gets more specific as you go from the top to the bottom. The three that I have highlighted in bold here are really the ones that we deal with here in the Planning Commission. So the decision-making process, just kind of talk a little bit about that and kind of how that works, talk about due process, kind of some of your public hearings, and then findings or recommendations that you make as we move forward. Just kind of the difference between legislative and quasi-judicial acts. Legislative actions, they, really they're the ones that are made by the mayor and council. They're the ones who do that. And those really, the goal is for those to be reasonable and non-discriminatory. Quasi-judicial, those are decisions that really need to be supported by substantial efforts that has been made on the record. Again, the zoning examiner is an example of a quasi-judicial body. Mayor and council is an example of a legislative body. There are also other things that ensure that due process occurs, things like public notice, whether it's through a newspaper, whether it's through a mailing out to different property owners, or by posting or putting signs and notices on properties, or putting up agendas, even posting them online or posting them at City Hall for people to know that they have that opportunity for input into the process. Related to just kind of public hearings, and because we deal with public hearings quite a bit, just kind of some tips. And if obviously you guys have been in public hearings and have a lot of experience with this as well. So if you have additional kind of tips related to it, definitely feel free to raise your hand and add to the conversation. But things to be for effective public hearings, focus on the subject under consideration, understand kind of what the process is, what those roles are that we talked a little bit about before. Kind of maintain that open flow of ideas, to be open to kind of different perspectives, and then making sure that we follow that meeting format related to those public hearings. And then also just kind of making sure that we take that public input, staff's input, as well as your own personal experiences, and then make good decisions. So thinking about what is the issue that that is in front of us that we're deciding, making sure that we have the ability to review everything that we have in front of us, written and oral, and applying that, and keeping that long view, and remaining objective really through the process. It's really important to be able to do that in making those decisions. And then just kind of understanding that we do deal with the unexpected quite a bit, and just knowing that that's going to happen. There's always going to be last minute and unexpected project opposition. There will be new evidence that gets brought at hearings, new documents. There may be changes in political winds. Just understanding that it's a process as we go through it, and things do change, and there always will be things that are unexpected. So just kind of related to Planning Commission recommendations, and this is really what you do. You provide those recommendations to mayor and council, and the purpose here is to really provide a framework for making a decision for mayor and council. And then it really it facilitates that orderly analysis to reduce the likelihood of random leaps from evidence to conclusions. So it creates that process so kind of how we've gotten to whatever decisions are being made. It also helps to create that record for the basis of that decision. So having that study session and that public hearing, having all that testimony, recording that testimony, and then creating that recommendation based on that kind of shows that decision-making process. In your recommendation, just kind of as kind of how some comments related to that, just kind of make sure that it's explaining the basis for the decision as you're doing that. Refer to factual evidence. Understand that it's part of the public record as we do that, because it's definitely whatever recommendation you make is a letter that gets sent to mayor and council. And then, just make sure that it's sufficient to determine whether or not it helps to support if there is judicial review in the future related to that. So that's the Planning Commission, the recommendations, and kind of how we function. And then I just want to talk a little bit about some procedures and open meeting law. And again, we're happy to answer any questions or kind of talk through some of this stuff with you. This is always one of those ones, and I will say related to this, this is an abbreviated version because I knew we were having two other presentations, but the clerk's office, which we're going to post as well online, has a longer, kind of more detailed version of this, which we will provide to you as well. So related to that, so what is open meeting law, and how, what do we have to adhere to? So this is defined in state law. Those are the references to ARS if you feel like reading state statutes. Not everyone likes doing that type of thing. So there are really two core concepts related to this. One is that it requires that all meetings of a public body be conducted openly. That's with notices and agendas that contain information necessary to inform the public about committee activities. It provides, and then it also provides public access to government and ensures that people's business is conducted openly. So again, you're just making sure, it's basically a law that was enacted to maximize public access to governmental processes. It has been amended over years, but the intent is still really to provide openness in government. It's intended to ensure public access to government and to ensure that people's business is conducted openly in public. I did want to point out here that what is a meeting, and it's really, it is defined, it's defined as a gathering in person or through technological devices of a quorum of a public body at which a legal action is discussed, proposed, deliberated, or taken. And I think this is really important because there are certain situations to where it may not feel like a meeting, but it can potentially be a meeting. One of which is through emails and what they call daisy chaining, essentially. But communicating through email to other commissioners, especially that is of a quorum, would be a violation of open meeting law. So we just need to be careful about those conversations that we have with other commissioners outside of publicly noticed meetings and things of that sort. So some of the elements of the open meeting law. One is that public must be permitted to attend and listen. Call the audience isn't required, but that's definitely something that it's in our bylaws and in our rules of procedure, so it is required for us, but not to meet open meeting law. All legal action must occur during the public meeting. We have to do meeting minutes, including for subcommittees. So meeting minutes, there was a determination by our city attorney and by, I believe, the state that a recording can qualify for meeting minutes, just to let you know kind of how that works. Public notice is required, so you have to post the agenda. We post it online and at City Hall. I'm not sure if anybody actually goes to City Hall and reviews the agendas that get put out there, but we do that as well. Any member of the public may record the meeting. So if you wanted to record our wonderful meeting right now, you're more than welcome to do so. And then the room must be large enough to hold the number of people reasonably expected to attend. So whoever's setting up the meeting, you need to anticipate how large of a meeting it might be. So if you have a very controversial topic, setting it up in a conference room that holds 15 people does not meet open meeting law, essentially.
Hey, Dan?
Other ways, yeah, of course.
To piggyback off of when you said the notices have to be posted publicly, they also have to be posted within 24 hours of the meeting time. So just thought I'd throw that in there for you.
That was in my notes and I must have skipped over it, so thank you. So some additional elements kind of open meeting law. The agenda must contain enough information so that the public is informed about the matters to be discussed. They need to know what is going to be discussed, if it's an action item, study session, public hearing, that type of thing. You need to have a quorum in order to have a meeting. I talked a little bit about call the audience, it's not required. There are executive sessions that we could potentially have. I have never had one with the Planning Commission, but they're regularly, the mayor and council do have them on items that have sensitive information or legal matters. So that is something that can occur. There's a requirement to do a legal action report to make sure that is recorded as far as what action has occurred at those meetings with a vote and everything else that goes along with that. And Bambi, do you can you remind me, is that 3 business days within the meeting, or is it 5? It's 3?
It's 3, yeah. So the legal action report has to be posted and available to the public within 3 business days from the date that the meeting was held.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And then meeting minutes as well are required to be posted as well and voted upon. So I did want to talk a little bit. This is the one that's come up quite a bit in kind of just questions that we've had from commissioners in the past, and wanted to talk a little bit about just conflicts of interest and kind of how that operates related to this. So this right here, this is actually a little bit of a simplified version, but it's very similar to what the state statute says, where it says, you know, any public officer or employee who has or whose relative has a substantial interest in any decision, and it's in any decision of public agency, shall make known such interest in the official records of such public agency, and shall refrain from participating in any manner as an officer or employee in such decision. In this case, substantial interest, it means pecuniary or proprietary interest related to a financial interest, essentially. And that's either direct or indirect, other than, you know, kind of a remote interest. So it's not exact as far as what it is, but you have to really think about the public perception related to this, and whether it's, you know, it would be perceived, or whether you feel that there's any chance of that being perceived as having an interest in a decision related to that. So kind of declare, if you were to have a situation on this related to this, this is kind of what you would go through. And I think the goal here, or the recommendation here, is that if it's in doubt, you really should err on the side of caution related to a conflict of interest. So if you believe there is a conflict of interest, or you feel there is, and if you have a question about it, feel free to reach out to us. We can always, you know, consult with the city attorney and give you advice on it as well. But determine if you or a member of the public body has that interest. If you determine there may be a conflict, before the meeting, advise the chairperson of the committee that you are declaring a conflict of interest. You can also reach out to staff, and we're happy to do that for you as well. And then once you're in the meeting, you would verbally recuse yourself from that item. And then during the item, just refrain from participating in any manner, including discussing, voting, or in any way attempting to influence the decision for the rest of the members. And then we make sure that we declare that and mark that down in our meeting minutes and the legal action report related to that. Sorry, Lex, Chair Willett, you have your hand up?
Yeah, Dan, just a quick question for you in regards to, if you can speak a little bit to when a conflict must be established. Like I'm speaking terms like whether it's a study session or an informational session or a public hearing, etc.
So it's really, it's participating in any manner in the decision. So even if it were a study session or something of that sort, you really should recuse yourself from that if you have an interest in it.
Thank you.
Of course. Excellent. Yeah. So if this does come up, and a lot of times, you know, especially with planning commissioners, we either are planners or we're designers, and we have a lot of times work in the industry. So this does come up from time to time. If you feel that there may be some sort of conflict, whatever, feel free to reach out to us. We're always happy to help you kind of determine whether or not there is a conflict. However, I will say that if you feel there may be a conflict, it may be better to err on the side of caution in those situations. Commissioner Martin, I believe you had your hand up, or are you?
Yeah, just clarify recusing it when we have the meetings at the city council office. You have to leave the room, and I think with the digital or the Zoom meetings, you have to leaves the Zoom meeting. Is that correct?
Yeah, Commissioner Martin. So what we've been doing is, yeah, we would, I would kind of get your phone number ahead of time, and you would leave the meeting, and then I would send you a quick text message or give you a call and let you know when we were ready to move on to the next item.
Thank you.
Yep. Of course. So that's kind of what we had. Again, there's more detail related to open meeting law that the clerk's office has. And yes, it looks like Commissioner Zajir, I'm happy to answer whatever questions you may have, if I can.
Gear. Just step back. So now being a new commissioner, and so when I have a question, as far as now, we can't discuss it off the record between the commissioners, so I can't ask their advice. So can I email you and ask you, say, pertaining to the IID, and they're going to maybe change some of the code up in there, the UDC code. So can I ask like specific questions of you about that, or do I wait until we actually are in a meeting to bring up those questions?
Yeah, so Commissioner Zajir, so ultimately it's best to have those conversations in public with the rest of the commissioners so they can all hear. If you do have something like that, feel free. I mean, you can send it to us ahead of time, but what we would end up doing is have you introduce it during the meeting, and then we would have that discussion. So everyone can hear the response and to the question that you have.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course.
Are there any other questions for Daniel? Not seeing any. Well, thank you, Dan, for that presentation. I really appreciate a refresher on those rules. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, that's PDSD staff announcement. So Dan, Corin.
I don't know, Corin, do you want to go?
Just a few announcements. And I would say that we have a lot going on this fall. Dan is going to share a calendar of upcoming items for Planning Commission in just a minute, but beyond just the work of Planning Commission, PDSD is busy with a number of things right now. We're about to launch our new permit system. That is going to launch October 31st. So we will be launching that in about 6 weeks. So we're very busy with training leading up to that. Also, our online application system will be down for a week before that permit system launches. So it'll be down from October 20th to the 31st when we go live with our new system. Some other things we're working on is launching our general plan update. So that's something we'll also do an informational item for the Planning Commission on in the next couple of months. As Planning Commission will be playing a very large role in that. So we want to give Planning Commission an update probably in November sometime. Again, just kind of an informational item like we did tonight on IID to share a little bit about the timeline and scope of that plan. We also just recently got direction from our mayor and council to develop a new urban overlay district, a zoning overlay on Grant Road. That functions kind of similarly to the infill incentive district Dan was discussing tonight. But that's another project we'll be working on in the near future.
Great, thank you. Moving on to item number 7, future agenda items. Dan?
Yep. Actually, I am going to share my screen one last time. So there we go. So we have a very busy kind of last quarter of the year or so with the commission with projects coming through. So I wanted to kind of share the upcoming schedule. I mean, obviously subject to change, but just to give you an understanding that there will be a lot of meetings kind of moving forward related to this. So we're looking at, sometimes, 2 meetings a month as we move forward. October 12th, we're looking to come to you with the marijuana special exception process for a study session. Because of notice issues, we'll be kind of, we'll do the October 26th with the infill incentive district update study sessions. So we're targeting that date. And then November will be kind of a handful of different kind of public hearings that we're looking at. So November 2nd with the marijuana public hearing, and then looking at November 16th. Those are a little more tentative as we get further out, obviously. We have a code streamlining package that will eventually be coming to you, as well as the public hearing for the infill incentive district. So a very busy October, November, and December. And we appreciate everything you do, and just wanted to kind of put that in front of you so you can plan ahead for some of those meetings as we move forward. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Dan. Moving on to item number 8, that's call to the audience. Do we have any members of the public that wishes to address the commission with us this evening? I'm not seeing anybody, hearing anything, except for all your beautiful faces out there. So I'm going to move on to the next item, seeing no hands raised, and that is adjournment. So can I get somebody to make a motion to adjourn this evening?
I motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Very good. Well, thank you all for participating this evening. It's been a great discussion, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening and a great week. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Great presentations.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Have a good
Nice
night.
meeting all of you.
Nice to meet you.